Hey fellow tankers, it's Mobius here with another video for World of Tanks console. So today's video, we are actually taking a look at one of the newest maps that came out sometime in the last week. It is called Ravaged Capital, and it's supposed to be a Paris-themed map, which it is. In the background on the north end of the map, you can actually get a good view of the Eiffel Tower. So, Ravaged Capital, as you can see, it's a very urban map, and it's very similar to Rulenberg in that you have a central courtyard area here with a lot of streets that branch off from it. So a lot of the fighting kind of gets centralized in a couple locations. The courtyard, not so much, but the areas in the south here and the north here is where a lot of the major battling goes on. I've only played this map a couple times so far, so driving around on this map for me in this video will be a bit of an exploration experience for me as well. So me personally, all my fighting that I have done has been in the southern areas here. And the reason why I like going to the south area is that it allows you to control the more urban environment. And if you can control the more urban environment of the map, it gives you much bigger flanking opportunities down the other streets. Now, as you can see in this southern area, there's still lots of cover. There's several destroyed buildings for you to hide behind, and there's also lots of pieces of rubble that you can fit some of your lower tanks behind. For example, you can see my T-54 lightweight fits just behind this. A little bit of a higher profile tank could still fit behind this fairly well. Something like maybe a T-10 or something could still fit behind this very well. So from locations like these, you're able to kind of just peek out from the corner, try to keep your turret facing the enemy, and you should be able to be largely protected if you have really good turret armor. So this spot right here in the middle is actually a pretty good location. It's just on the east side of this street here. This spot, it's a very aggressive location to take, but you are still able to cover yourself. For example, you can see from the right side over here, anybody at this location right there that I just fired at won't be able to shoot you if you're able to keep yourself tucked in behind this piece of rubble here, and you're able to poke out forward this way. You can get shots over there, or if you're able to bring your tank around far enough, you can get shots over to here with a taller tank especially. Or if you have decent gun depression, you can poke up on top of the rubble pile just a little bit and possibly get a shot over. That does keep you exposed when you do that though, so you do want to be mindful of that. You could also play this corner here. As you can see, this building does cover you from the right hand side. You got to worry about your left though. You are very exposed on the left side, so you'll have to utilize some good side scraping. And of course on the other side, it's kind of the same story. If you do get a tank up this far, it's a very aggressive position to take, and you could side scrape off of this corner here so that you can shoot down this laneway right there that I just fired at. That basically goes into this gap over here in K7, K8. It's a good spot to take up. You could also take up this location using the rubble pile to keep you largely hull down, not perfectly hull down, but pretty decently. Of course, as I said, a taller tank will have an easier time. You could probably even poke over this side here and come forward and shoot through that gap there, of course. Again, you could still side scrape here and look to the gap on the left hand side, shooting out over there if anybody is trying to work those corners. So this little central area where these two buildings are and the little rubble pile in the middle, as I said, pretty important location, but it is an extremely aggressive position to take. You have to make sure that your flanks are covered, because it's very easy for somebody to come down, say, this street here and come around to start getting side shots in you. Now, I have seen people come to this rubble pile here as well, especially if they have good gun depression or a good turret or both. You can actually work this here and shoot into the gap that is down here again in the very south, and the same thing with the other direction. If you're on the east side, you can use this rubble pile. It'll largely keep you covered from your flank on the side there, and you can poke over this piece of rubble. It'll keep you hull down on quite a number of tanks, except for the absolute tallest of tanks, and you should be able to poke over and get shots onto the rubble pile over here right in front of us on the right, or possibly even that rubble pile down here in that back area. There's also the gap in the back there, but it's kind of covered, so it's a little difficult to do that. So that's generally a look at the southern area. As I said, play around with this area. There's lots of buildings, destroyed buildings that you can go off of, lots of little piles of rubble that you can use for cover. Make sure you're taking locations where your flank is protected from one side and the direction you're focusing on is more or less where you may be exposed, because not each and every single one of these pieces of cover will protect you from all sides. So make sure whichever side is unprotected, that's the side you're focusing on. You want to be directing your fire over there. You want to be directing your frontal armor over there to better protect yourself. Now, these first sets of streets right off of that southern combat zone, here and here, they've got several of these funny wall structures. These are a nice piece of cover that you can use in order to support teammates. If there's a push coming through this area, you can use these pieces of cover pretty nicely to support your teammates if they're trying to escape, or you can use them for cover to stay behind, preventing people from shooting you while you are also running away. For example, I was able to use this piece here, poke out track and E5 in my Object 140. That allowed my friendly teammate, or actually my platoon mate, and another medium tank as well, to continue running away. He was able to round the corner and run away. Similar situation over here. You have some more wall. Oop, that's a phone booth, a very indestructible phone booth. You have another little wall over here. This one's actually pretty good for a taller tank with good turret armor. You can poke right over these sandbags that I am pointing at right there, that I just shot at. You can actually get your turret right over top of that, and you are very hull down. This is a pretty good defensible location to take if you spawn on the east side and the enemy team is pushing through that southern area that we were just in, or if you manage to come through this center area over here and you push all the way up to here, you could use this as your kind of posting point. It's a pretty good location to take where you can get some side shots into people if they're trying to work the corners in this gap here and this gap here into that southern area. Now, this center courtyard itself, it's not completely open. There's this little hillock with the memorial statue in the top in the very middle, so there is some slight cover there. You could use this as a fighting position if you have a tank that has decent enough gun depression. It's pretty heavily sloped, so you would probably need a good amount of 8 or 9 degrees of gun depression, I would say, in order to use this effectively. As you can see, my T-54 lightweight can't do it at all, but this thing only has about 5 degrees of gun depression. And once again, you can see down this street as well, on the west side from the southern courtyard. Again, there's these walls, really good locations to take up if you're pressing the attack from the other side. You could come up here where I am, for example, use it as a nice piece of cover. If you manage to sneak all the way up here, shoot at people in the sides who are trying to work that corner, or come all the way around even and shoot at people that are in the southern courtyard area. Try to get some nice flanking shots on them. Good defensible piece of cover as well to try and track people who are chasing you down if you and your platoon mates or your teammates are retreating from that area, because it's just going to hell in a handbasket. So lots of options in the south there, largely because of these streets. The other thing that these little walls offer is concealment. You can actually get a good flank going if you know, for example, let's just use an example here. If you know somebody is on that corner in the bottom left of that grid square that I just pinged right there. So basically, that corner right there that I just fired at, obviously on ground level. And if your tank is low profile enough, like you've got a low profile, say probably like a Russian medium or something like that, you could use this to conceal your tank all the way up to this point here. This would allow you to get a lot closer if you need to get some distance on your opponent. That way you're popping up on their radar right here, as opposed to driving somewhere kind of in the middle or on the opposite side, such as coming in from this angle over here, where it is very likely that their tank will spot you from this angle right here that I'm pointing at. So you can use the walls for straight up concealment. It actually works pretty well if you have a lower profile tank. Taller tanks like big heavy tanks, or just taller mediums like some of the German mediums, they won't be so good with it though. Now on the north side here, there is actually this big memorial building kind of area. It's all black on the map, but this is totally traversable. As you can see, I just drove up the stairs from the center area. There's all these other big stairs down in here. This is entirely one big battleground. This is a much more open kind of location, so if you like using slight ridges and stuff like that, and these kind of craters to provide yourself with some natural cover, So this area is really good for tanks that have a good amount of natural gun depression as well as good turret armor as well. They will be very effective in this area. There's all sorts of little hills and ditches that you can take cover in, use as hard cover to protect yourself and keep your strong turret armor out there, or to just simply duck behind when you poke out to take a shot and you're in a reload. You can just duck behind it really quickly. Now these little wall things here, like this one that I just shot at, they're destructible. They are not good pieces of cover. They will block one shot from, say, an HE or a heat round, but AP and APCR will go right through them. So if you're actually trying to use them for cover, you'll find that it's not very effective, and they're not very tall anyways, so most tanks will very likely be seen if you're trying to hide behind them, for sure. Now, I would highly recommend against actually trying to play this area up in here where H-Badger is sitting, for example. It's very flat, it's very open, there's no real cover in this area, so you really only want to use this as a traversing point. If you're going from the north, like if your team has won the north and you're trying to flank all the way down to the south, that's obviously the fastest way to do it. So you take that route, or if you're trying to go from the south into the north, and it's going to take either a little bit too long to either go around on either sides of the building here and over here, or if you just need to get up into the middle because there's plenty of enemies that are kind of occupying these middle areas here, and you can poke up and get shots in their side, by all means go for it. But as I said, it's very risky. For slower tanks, like slower heavy tanks, slower tank destroyers, you're very exposed as you're cruising across this. It's not taking me very long to traverse it because I'm in a pretty quick light tank. The 54 lightweight is a pretty quick tank, so I'm able to get across that very quickly. So that more or less sums it all up, unless I'm missing some other little detail that I'm not quite aware of. I forgot to mention that there are also these areas in the very back, in the top right and top left corners, like this area here and this area over here. Some additional streets where if your team is losing in the north quite badly, you could use these buildings as good cover to break line of sight and conceal yourself until you are unspotted if you're trying to make a retreat. Or you could try and set up a defensible position from here. If the enemy team is making a big push through the north, you could have some tank destroyers kind of fall back and try to regroup around these corners and surprise people and get a crap load of damage done as they round the corners on you. Again, in the north, there are some of these little walls in these streets. As you can see, you can use this as a nice piece of cover, but you have very limited firing options because there's a ridge that runs almost all along this area here and over to here as well. So it will be blocking a lot of your shots. About the only time this is very effective is if you've got people using these ridges down in the south that I'm pointing at. So basically right over in this area that I just pinged, or sorry, I couldn't ping it. Basically in Bravo 2, Bravo 3, those areas. That's really the only use that this spot would see. So tank destroyers, or tank destroyer players, I should say, if you prefer hanging back and sniping all the time with your tank destroyer, no matter what the tank destroyer is, you're probably going to be a little out of your element in this map because there's no real opportunities to do that in many locations. It is definitely doable down some of these long streets, but again, you still have to be very wary of your surroundings when you're doing that because it's very easy for enemies to break line of sight and go around by flanking through one of these streets where they're completely covered. They will be completely unseen, and you won't know they're coming until they're right behind you and shooting you in the butt. So you have to pay a lot of attention to your map, especially if you're in if you're in one of those TDs or if you're pushing into the urban areas with whatever tank you're in. And just be fully aware of the situation. If a tank backs off and disappears, try to reposition yourself to prepare for them. And they might not actually be trying to flank you, but it's always better safe than sorry. You can try assuming they are, and then repositioning yourself to a better location where you can defend yourself from their flank, or even better, stop them from their flank and turn their attack around on them, so to speak. So the last little thing in this north area I forgot to mention, as I said, there was that little tunnel that I kind of went through. It starts here and it ends here. It could be a decent flank. It could provide a decent flanking opportunity. Sorry, If your tank is small enough and if you're able to dart down into here quickly enough, I wouldn't really recommend this though, because if you get spotted here, if you get caught here, you would essentially be stuck, because there's only one way in or one way out. And more importantly, it's easy for an enemy tank, I should say, to drive up onto one of the ledges on top of you and just fall down on top of you if you're not underneath one of these concrete ceiling bits. So I think that just about sums it up for Ravaged Capital. As I said, experiment on this. There's lots of cover to use in the main battle areas up here in the north and down here in the south. Lots of good locations to take up. Over time, you'll learn the key locations that really work for you and ones that don't so much. So it will definitely take some time for people to get the feel for this map. For sure, because it is brand new. So it always takes a little time before people pick up on what's necessary. I'd like to give a big thank you to HBadger94, fellow Immortals clan member, for helping me out with this video. And thanks to all of you who watched this map drive. I really hope it was educational and helpful to your future experiences on Ravaged Capital. This has been Mobius Y for World of Tanks console. Thanks very much for watching, and I hope to see you on the battlefield or in my next video. As always, happy tanking.